This is Introduction to Mathematics, Intermediate Level. This course is facilitated by Limitless Learning TT, where it's all about learning on the go. Log into our website from any place at any time and view past videos, practice problems, and solutions for your course. For more information on the services we offer, please visit www.limitlesslearningtt.com. If you have any additional questions or concerns, please feel free to email us at info@limitlesslearningtt.com. In the previous lesson, we were introduced to integers, and particularly negative integers, and we were learning how to add and subtract negative integers on a number line, as well as using the concept of the box and the balloons and the weights. So what we're going to do in this lesson is we're going to continue talking about addition and subtraction of positive and negative numbers, and then we're going to talk about multiplication and division when it comes to negative numbers, or the inclusion of a negative number. So let's just do a quick recap of the previous lesson. So we had a box with some balloons and with some weights. So our weights were at the bottom. And we regarded our weights as negative numbers, and we thought about our balloons as positive numbers. So the more balloons we have will encourage our box to move upwards or to get larger. The more weights we have will pull our box downwards or make it smaller. So if we are talking about positive numbers, remember positive numbers are represented by balloons, and our negative numbers are represented by weights. So we know that when we added a balloon, which means we're adding a positive number. So when we add a positive number, we add a balloon. And when we add a balloon, it means we have more balloons to the top than weights to the bottom. So when you add a balloon, which is adding a positive number, you get larger. What if instead you added weights? So instead, I want to add weights. I'm going to add more weights. So I now have more weights than balloons. So the more weights I add, I am going to get smaller. So when I add a negative number, I get smaller. And again, you're getting smaller because you have more weights, so you're pulling the box downwards. So remember, weights represent negative numbers, so the more weights I add, or the more negative numbers I add, which means that my box goes down and I get smaller. Then what if instead I wanted to take away weights? If I take away weights, it means that I have less weights at the bottom here. So I take away weights. If I take away the weights, I have more balloons at the top. So my box is going to move upwards and I'm going to get larger. And remember again, a weight is a negative number. So therefore, when I subtract a negative number, I get larger. I move upwards. And then also, if I were to take away my balloons, or if I were to take away a couple of balloons, what happens, right? So if I subtract a positive number, that means I took away some balloons. I now have, my box is going to move downwards because I have less balloons. So the less balloons I have means that my box is going to come downwards, which means I'm going to get smaller. So when you subtract positive numbers, you get smaller. Okay, so we would have talked about all of these things in the previous lesson. So after we spoke about this box, balloons, and weights analogy, we moved into looking at negative numbers. We added some rules about negative numbers, and then we did some examples. So we're going to go back to that list of stuff that we had and work on some more examples so that you get the hang of using negative numbers and positive numbers when it comes to addition and subtraction. So these are the rules that we came up with in the last lesson. When we add positive numbers, we get larger. I just showed that. When we subtract positive numbers, we get smaller. When we add negative numbers, we get smaller. And when we subtract negative numbers, we get larger. So that's what we got from the balloon analogy. Then we talked about a smaller number minus a larger number always gives me a negative number. So for example, if I have 40 minus 60, 40 is smaller than 60. So 40 minus 60 is going to give me a negative number. So I put a negative sign, and then I find the difference between my two numbers. So I find the difference between 60 and 40. Difference means that we're subtracting. So 60 minus 40 is going to give me 20. So therefore 40 minus 60 is going to give me negative 20. And it makes sense because if I only have 40 items and I have to take away 60 from that, it means that I'm going to have a negative number. I'm going to move 40 places to the left. That takes me to 0. And then I have to move an additional 20 spaces. And that means I'm going to be on the negative side. So when you have a smaller number minus a larger number, your answer is always a negative number. And then you find the difference between the two numbers. Then I'm going to add that to our point, that you get a negative number and then you find the difference between the two numbers. Great. Then if we have a negative number minus a positive number, so negative, I'm going to stick with negative 40 minus a positive number, let's make it 60, is going to be equal to a negative number. So I put my negative sign because it represents a negative number. And then what I do is I add these two numbers. So I do 60 plus 40. And that gives me 100. So my answer is negative 100. So when you have a negative number minus a positive number, you get a negative number, and then you add the two numbers. So I'm going to also put that information into our rules. Okay, great. And then the last one is we had a negative number. Oh, yes, I put in the rule. A negative number minus a positive number. So I'm continuing. If the number you're adding is greater, that should be a negative number plus a positive number. If the number you're adding is greater than the first number without the negative sign, right, then your answer will be positive. If it's not greater than, then your answer will be negative, and you find the difference between the two numbers. So let's do an example. So our negative number is negative 40. And we're going to be adding a positive number. Let's say that is 60. And the first thing we have to see is if the number we're adding, which is 60, is greater than the first number without the sign. So the first number without the sign is 40. 60 is greater than 40, so therefore our answer will be a positive number. Right, you can put the positive sign or you cannot put the positive sign, it doesn't matter. And then the next step is you find the difference between the two numbers. So that's 60 minus 40, which is 20. So your answer is going to be positive 20. So you can write it with plus 20 or you can just put it as 20. What if instead the number you have is not greater than the first number? So let's do another example. Suppose you're going to add 25 and you see that 25 is not larger than 40. If it's not larger than 40, your answer is going to be a negative number. And then you find the difference between the two. So that's 40 minus 25. I borrow 1 from my tens, so I end up with 10. 5 from 10 is 5, and 2 from 3 is 1. So I end up with 15, so my answer is negative 15. So now what we're going to be doing is using these 5 rules to do some practice problems so that you get the hang of it. So our first question is easy enough. It's going to be 35 minus 20. This is a straight subtraction question where the two numbers we have are positive numbers. 35 is positive, 20 is positive. We're doing subtraction. So we have our tens, our ones, 35, 20, our subtraction sign. 0 from 5 is 5, 2 from 3 is 1, so our answer is 15, positive 15. Simple enough. Our next question is going to be 15 minus 23. 15 minus 23. So we have a positive number minus another positive number. So this number here is larger than this number. Right? So which rule are we looking for? So we have smaller number minus larger number. So we go back to our rules. That's right here. Smaller number minus larger number. We get a negative number, so we're going to put a negative sign. Negative sign. And then our rule says we have to find the difference between the two numbers. So we're going to find the difference between the two numbers. Tens, ones, 23, 15. We can't take 5 from 3, so we go and we borrow a 10. That makes 13 ones, so 5 from 13 is 8. And 1 minus 1 is 0, so our answer is negative 8. So we would have used the second rule, which is smaller number minus larger number is a negative number, and then we find the difference between those two numbers. Okay, next question. We're going to do negative 34 plus 32. So we have a negative number plus a positive number. Which rule are we looking at? Negative number plus positive number. That's our last rule, the one that's in black. So it says if the number that we're adding is greater than the first number. The number we're adding, is it greater? This is the number we're adding. Is it greater than the first number? Is 32 greater than 34? No, it isn't. It's smaller. 32 is less than 34. So if the number we're adding is smaller, right, means it's not greater than, then my answer is going to be negative. So I put a negative sign. And then the rule is I find the difference between these two numbers. So tens, ones, 34, 32. 4 from 2 is 2. 3 minus 3 is 0. So my answer is negative 2. Next question. I have negative 162 plus 30. So I have a negative number plus a positive number. So again, that's the same rule I just used. The number that I'm adding is 30, and 30 is clearly smaller than 162. So therefore, my answer is a negative number. And then next, I have to find the difference between these two numbers. So hundreds, tens, ones. I put my 162, 30. I take them away. 0 from 2 is 2. 3 from 6 is 3. 0 from 1, or nothing from 1, is 1. So my answer is negative 132. So you really have to learn these rules, learn and understand these rules in order to be able to do these questions. Okay, let's continue working on our examples. Our next question is negative 27 minus 18. So I have a negative number minus a positive number. I go back to my rules. Negative number minus a positive number, that is this green rule. So my negative number minus a positive number is going to give me a negative number. So I put an equal sign, I put my negative sign, and then the rule says that I have to add these two numbers. So I get my tens column, my ones column. I have 27, 18. I'm going to add them. 7 plus 8 is 15. Right? 15 is 5 ones. I put my 5 ones in the column. And I have an additional, that additional 1 here. I'm going to add it here in my tens column. Then I go over to my tens column. I get 2 plus 1 plus 1 is going to give me 4. So my answer is negative 45. Okay, so that was the green rule. Next question. Negative 91 minus 104. So that's the same rule that we just did. Negative number minus a positive number. That means that our answer is going to be negative, and we have to add these two numbers. So hundreds, tens, and ones. I have 104 plus 91. 4 plus 1 is 5, 0 plus 9 is 9, and 1 plus nothing, or 1 plus 0, is 1. So my answer is negative 195. Next question. Negative 45 plus 67. I have a negative number plus a positive number. That's my black rule. Okay, negative number plus a positive number. I need to see if the number that I'm adding is greater than the first number. The number that I'm adding is 67. It is greater than my first number, which is 45. So therefore, my answer is going to be positive. And then I find the difference between my two numbers. So I put my tens, my ones, 67 minus 45. 5 from 7 is 2. 4 from 6 is 2. So my answer is positive 22, or you can just write it as 22, with or without the positive sign. Next question. I have negative 10 plus 38. So again, that's my black rule. Negative number plus a positive number. And the first thing I have to check and see is if the number I'm adding, which is 38, if that's larger than my first number, ignoring the negative sign. And 38 is larger than 10, so therefore my answer is going to be positive. I put the positive sign, and then I find the difference between those two numbers. So that's going to be 38 minus 10. 0 from 8 is 8. 1 from 3 is 2. So my answer is plus 28, or again, you can write it without the plus sign as just 28. Okay, I'm going to keep continuing with another example. I am doing -5 plus 39. So again, it's the same black rule. My second number that I'm adding, 39, is larger than my first number without the sign, which is 5. So my answer is going to be positive. And then I find the difference between these two numbers. So that is going to be 39 minus 5. 5 from 9 is 4. Nothing or 0 from 3 is 3. So my answer is plus 34, or you could have just written it as 34. Okay, so again, the more practice you do, is the easier questions like this become. Let's work on some more examples. My next question is 52 minus 61. So I have a smaller number minus a larger number. That's going to be my yellow rule. Smaller number minus a larger number gives me a negative number, and then I find the difference between those two numbers. So I'm going to go back. I have a negative number, so I put my negative sign, and then I have to find the difference between these two numbers. So my tens and ones column, 61 minus 52. I can't take 2 from 1, so I borrow a 10. I'm left with 5 tens, and 10 ones plus 1 is 11. 2 from 11 is 9. 5 from 5 is 0. So my answer is minus 9 or negative 9. My next example is 33 minus 49. And again, that is the same rule, my yellow rule, a smaller number minus a larger number. So a smaller number minus a larger number is going to be a negative number. I put my negative sign. And then I want to find the difference between those two numbers. So I put my tens, my ones, 49 minus 33. 3 from 9 is 6, 3 from 4 is 1, so my answer is negative 16. My next question is 128 minus 140. And again, this is smaller number minus a larger number because 140 is greater than 128. So again, my answer is negative, and I have to find the difference between these two numbers. So I have hundreds, tens, and ones. 140 minus 128. I can't take 8 from 0, so I borrow a 10. I'm left with 3 tens. This becomes 10. 8 from 10 is 2. 2 from 3 is 1. And 1 minus 1 is 0. So my answer is negative 12. Next question. Minus 235 minus 320. So I have a negative number minus a positive number. That is my green rule. So that the answer is going to be a negative number, and then I'm going to add the two numbers. So I put my negative sign, and then I'm going to add the two numbers. The two numbers are 235 and 320. I'm going to add them together. 5 plus 0 is 5. 3 plus 2 is 5. 2 plus 3 is 5. So my answer is negative 555. My next question is minus 72 minus 428. So again, we're still on my green rule, which is negative number minus a positive number. So my answer is going to be a negative number, and then I have to add these two numbers together. So that is 72 plus 428. 2 plus 8 is 10, so that's 0, 10, and that 1 I'm going to put right under here. All right, 7 plus 2 plus 1 also gives me 10, so I put a 10 under here, and that 1 goes right here. And then 4 plus 1 is going to give me 5, so my answer is negative 500. So that's our last example for doing addition and subtraction when it comes to negative numbers. Again, you can get more practice doing the practice problems and looking at the solutions. The best way that this is gonna get easier is by doing as many practice problems as possible. So now we're going to move on to multiplying and dividing positive and negative numbers. So let's start with multiplication. So in the previous course, which is the beginner course, we would have learned how to do multiplication, and the numbers that we were multiplying were positive numbers. So when you're multiplying two positive numbers or two positive integers, your answer is also going to be a positive integer. So for example, if I wanted to do 12 multiplied by 7, okay, I would do my 10s and my 1s, my 12 and my 7. So 7 times 2 would be 14. Right, and I have to remember this 110, and then 7 times 1 will give me 7, plus this 110 will give me 8. So my answer is 84. So my two numbers that I used, 12 and 7, are positive numbers. They're positive integers. So when I multiply two positive numbers, I get back a positive number. 84 is a positive number. That's what we did when we were doing multiplication in the previous course. But now we know there's something that is negative numbers. So what happens when we multiply by negative numbers? So these are the rules. If we have a positive number multiplied by a positive number, we're going to get a positive number. We just showed that, right? So for example, if I have 4 multiplied by 2, these two numbers, 4 and 2, are positive numbers. I'm going to get a positive number, and 4 times 2 is 8. So this is really plus 8 or positive 8. Okay, so I'm going to get a positive number. If I have a positive number multiplied by a negative number, so 4 multiplied by negative 2, my answer is going to be a negative number. So I put a negative sign, and then I do 4 multiplied by 2, that's 8. And it doesn't matter whether the 4 is positive or whether the 2 is positive. So if I did minus 4 multiplied by 2, one of the numbers is negative and one is positive. So my answer is negative. And then I just do 4 multiplied by 2. So that's negative 8. So it doesn't matter which number is positive and which number is negative. As long as one number is positive and the other number is negative, then my result is negative. Okay, and the final rule is if I have a negative number multiplied by a negative number, I'm going to get a positive number. I'm just going to change that. Right, so a negative number multiplied by a negative number is a positive number. So when I have two negatives, I get something that's positive. So my example in red is negative 4 multiplied by negative 2. Because these two numbers are negative, my answer is going to be positive, and then 4 by 2 is 8. So my answer is just 8. So you can write it as positive 8, or you can just write it as the number 8. If you just write it as the number 8, it is assumed that the number is positive. Okay? So these are the 3 rules that we need to know when we're multiplying integers. That is, a positive number multiplied by a positive number is positive. A positive and a negative number multiplied by each other is negative. And then 2 negative numbers give you a positive response. So 2 positives, positive. A positive and a negative, negative. 2 negatives, positive. Okay, so commit that to memory. Let's work on some examples. So, my first example is 5 times negative 2. I have one positive number, one negative number. So that's my green rule. My answer is negative, and 5 times 2 is 10. Next example. Suppose I have 4 times 7. Both my numbers are positive, so my answer is positive. And 7 times 4 is 28. Now, again, to remember for multiplication, you have to remember your times tables, and then, of course, you need to know how to multiply in columns. And again, we would have done this in the previous course, which is Introduction to Mathematics, the beginner level. So we would have done that before. So if you're a little rusty on that, you can sign up for that course as well. Okay, next question is negative 3 times negative 7. I am multiplying 2 negative numbers, so my answer is positive, and 7 times 3 is 21. So my answer is positive 21. Next example, I have negative 4 times 3. I have one positive number, one negative number, so my answer is negative. I'm using that green rule. And then 4 times 3 is 12. So let's work on a little more difficult examples. So my first example, negative 121 multiplied by 3. So I have one negative number, one positive number. So that means I'm talking about my green rule. My answer is going to be negative. Then I have to multiply these two numbers. I put my hundreds, tens, and ones. I put my 121 multiplied by 3. Right? I start with my ones column. So 3 times 1 is 3. Then I move on to my tens column. 3 times 2 is 6. And then I move on to my hundreds column. 3 times 1 is 3. So my answer is negative 363. Next question. Suppose I had negative 42 multiplied by negative 5. I have 2 negative numbers, so if I have 2 negative numbers, my answer is going to be positive according to my rule that's in red. So I'm going to have a positive answer, and now I'm going to multiply these 2 numbers. I have 42 multiplied by 5. I'm going to start with my ones column. 5 times 2 is 10. So I put my 0 in my ones column, and I have to remember to add this 10 shortly. Then I multiply my tens column by 5. 5 times 4 is 20, plus this 1 here makes it 21. So I have 21. That is 210. So my answer is positive 210. Next example. Suppose I have negative 71 multiplied by 9. I have one negative number, one positive number. So I'm talking about my green rule. My answer is going to be negative, so I put a negative sign. Then I'm going to do this multiplication. I have 71 multiplied by 9. And I start with my ones column. So 9 times 1 is 9. Then I move to my tens column. 9 times 7 is 63. So I put 63. That's 639. So my final answer is negative 639. Next example. Suppose I had 12 multiplied by 40. I have two numbers. They are 12 and 40. So our answer is going to be positive. And then we want to multiply these two numbers by each other. So that's 12 multiplied by 40. Now we remember what our easy way of multiplying by 40 or 50 or 60 or some sort of tens. What the trick is, you add a 0 to the end and then you multiply this 4 by your ones column and your tens column. So that's the trick. You multiply, you add a 0 first and then you multiply your tens and your ones columns by this 4. 4 times 2 is going to be 8 and 4 times 1 is going to be 4. So your answer is 480. Now again, if you're not familiar with that little trick, we would have covered that in the first course, which is Introduction to Mathematics to Beginner Level. So you can always refresh yourself with that course if this is moving a little too quickly. Okay, so basically, when we're multiplying integers, we follow these three rules. Just again, two positive numbers multiplied by each other results in a positive number. A positive number multiplied by a negative number gives you a negative number, and it doesn't matter which one comes first, whether it's the positive number first by a negative number or negative number first by a positive number. The result is still a negative number. And then our final rule is if we have two negative numbers multiplied by each other, the result is a positive number, right? And we multiply as we would have learned from before. So the last thing that we want to talk about is the division of integers. And the rules for division are pretty much similar to the rules of multiplication. So these are the rules for division of integers, and you'd realize it looks a lot like the rules of multiplication. So a positive number divided by a positive number equals a positive number. So if I had 4 divided by 2, these are two positive numbers, so my answer is going to be positive, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. A positive number divided by a negative number, so that is 4 divided by negative 2. My answer is going to be a negative number. And 4 divided by 2 is 2, so that's negative 2. And it doesn't matter if the 4 is negative or the 2 is negative, the result is still the same. So negative 4 divided by positive 2 also gives you a negative number, a negative 2. And then the last rule is a negative number divided by a negative number gives a positive number. So negative 4 divided by negative 2 is going to be equal to a positive number, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. Okay, now with division, sometimes writing fractions is like doing division. So for example, if I had 4 over 2, right? These are two positive numbers. My result would be 2. Actually, I want to use another. Let's do it like this instead. If I had 4 divided by 7, it's a positive result. If I had negative 4 over 7, it's the same thing as putting the negative sign on the outside and putting 4 over 7, right? Or you could have had 4 over negative 7. This is the same, it's the same answer. So 4 over 7 or negative 4 over 7 is the same. It's the same result. And if ever you had negative 4, oh, I should have done this in colors, sorry. Right, and if ever I had negative 4 divided by negative 7, right, my result becomes positive. So that's the same thing as 4 over 7. It's as though the negative signs cancel each other. Okay, so this is fractional form here, and this is the regular form using the division sign. Okay, so these are the 3 rules in action. Let's look at some examples, of course. So my first question is 15 divided by negative 3. Now we have a positive number divided by a negative number. So my answer is going to be negative. So I put my negative sign. And then we all know 15 divided by 3 is 5. So my answer is negative 5. So 15 divided by negative 3 is negative 5. Also, if I had negative 15 divided by 3, a negative number divided by a positive number is also a negative number. So this would have been negative 5 as well. Next question is negative 70 divided by negative 10. So if I'm dividing two negative numbers, it means my result is going to be positive. And 70 divided by 10 is 70. Sorry, is 7. 70 divided by 10 is 7. So my answer is positive 7. So I just write the number 7. Right? Remember, you can write it as plus 7 or just 7. It's the same thing. My next question is 24 divided by 4. I have two positive numbers that I am dividing, so my answer is positive, and 24 divided by 4 is going to be 6. Now again, you're going to have to remember your times table as well as how to divide to do these questions. Next example, negative 144 divided by 3. I have a negative number divided by a positive number. That's my second rule, so my answer is a negative number. Then I have to do 144 divided by 3. So that's 144 divided by 3. 3 into 14 is 4, because 4 times 3 is equal to 12. So this answer, I put my 4 right here. And the difference between 4 and 12 is 2. So I carry my 2 here. Then I do 3 into 24. And 3 into 24 is 8. So my answer is negative 48. My next question is negative 56 divided by -7. I am dividing two negative numbers, so therefore my result is going to be positive according to my red rule, or my rule that's in red. So therefore I have a positive result, and I remember that 56 divided by 7 is 8, so my answer is positive. That's positive 8. Next question. 16 divided by -8. Right, I have a positive number divided by a negative number, so that's my green rule. My answer is going to be negative. And then 16 divided by 8 is going to be 2, so that is -2. Next question is 104 divided by -4. I have a positive number divided by a negative number, so my answer is going to be negative. And then now I'm going to have to do division to figure this out. I have 104 divided by 4. 4 into 10, because 4 can't go into 1. 4 into 10 is going to give me 2, because 2 times 4 is equal to 8. And the difference between 8 and 10 is 2. So I add that 2, or that 2 that's remaining from dividing 10 by 4. I add it to my 4. And now I have 24. And 4 into 24 is 6. So my answer is -26. Okay, and once again, all you're doing is following the rules that pertain to division and positive and negative numbers, and you have to remember how to do your division from either the previous course, or you can, get a brush up with some examples or some practice problems. Okay, let's do one final example for this and wrap up this lesson. -456 divided by -8. Our final question. So we have two negative numbers. If we're dividing a negative number by another negative number, then our answer is going to be positive. So positive number. And then we want to divide 456 by 8. 8 can't go into 4, so therefore 8 into 45 is going to be 5, because 5 times 8 gives me 40. So 5 into 45 is 5 remainder 5, and that remainder 5, I'm going to put it right here. And 8 into 56 is going to be 7. So my answer, it's a positive answer, and it's positive 57. So that brings us to the end of this lesson. This lesson would have covered a recap of last lesson, which is the introduction of negative integers and how we add and subtract negative numbers. So we would have worked on that first, did a lot of examples with that, and then we moved on to the rules for multiplication of integers, those 3 rules, which are very similar to the rules for division, which are another 3 rules. We wrap that up with examples, and that's the end of this lesson. So this is the Introduction to Mathematics Intermediate Level. This course is facilitated by Limitless Learning TT, where it's all about learning on the go. Log into our website from any place at any time and view past videos, practice problems, and solutions for your course. For more information on the services we offer, of course, you can visit our website. That's www.limitlesslearningtt.com. And of course, if you have any questions or concerns, you can always send us an email at info@limitlesslearningtt.com.